Welcome to Auditing with Autism. Welcome back. I've been gone for a while. I have to tell you, I was out for the count for a little while when during the holidays, got a lung infection. You can actually hear my lungs starting to fail in some of the other videos I made recently, and it failed me. I was down for about a month, feeling much better now. And welcome if you've never been here before. This is a place where I like to talk about philosophy. I like to talk about literature, and you know, things in general are discussed here about freedom, civil liberties, God. The human condition in general. Today is January 20th. This morning we swore in a new president, and so I feel like we're done with the holidays. We're done with this cycle of stress and anxiety that I've been sensitive to. I don't know, sensitive to it, that's for sure. I just haven't had the gumption to put up camera and talk in front of the camera. Got my headphones on. you know i I just got to admit, when you get sick, you really don't have the mental capacity to do a lot of critical thinking, or the desire to even do it. So I apologize for my absence. Happy New Year, everybody. 2025 is an action year. We're going to get a lot done this year. And if you don't mind revving up your engines early and often, let's go get them. Let's get done what we wanted to get done. This is the time to enjoy our experiences and get those experiences started, So with that affirmation, I wanted to suggest that what I'm going to talk about today in this video is nothing less than consciousness itself. I've got some quotes here in my quote book, and I was rereading some quotes from a woman named Dana Zohar, and she wrote some of my very favorite all-time books, top three type of books about the human condition. And she brings in quantum physics with consciousness. And I thought it would be interesting to share. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start. And, it's going to be a little bit of reading here and not a lot of commentary, just maybe as a way to kind of get back in the saddle again. Feels good. I'm in great spirits, and I hope everybody else is too. So I'm going to start off with actually another quote from another person. His name is Abner Shimony. And this is from 1981 when he wrote this. He says, concerning the brain and consciousness, he says, quote, each component of the electric field, at which point on a sparse-like surface is a separate degree of freedom, and all of these infinitely many degrees of freedom can in principle be assigned independent values. And so he's talking about electricity on an electric field while he's talking about consciousness, because the brain is nothing but electric fields. And so I just wanted to start off by suggesting that when you look at electric fields in general, just by itself, you will start to see these infinite degrees of freedom being expressed just on a mechanical level. Now, if you imagine taking those infinite degrees of electrical freedom and applying it directly into the harness that we might call our neural network of our brain, then you might begin to see the metaphor, the neural network, the harness. You can see that as a metaphor for the beginning of consciousness, and how all the neurons are related to each other like a spider's web, and how the electrical influences they create will always affect every other part of that web. So as our foundational thought metaphor for how I'm going to start talking about consciousness, I'm going to now bring in Dana Zohar. She's one of my heroes for sure in how I'm also thinking. I agree with everything she's writing, and studying. And it's really fun to listen to her. So without further ado, in 1990, 9 years later, Dana Zohar, in the book The Quantum Self. Now, this book, The Quantum Self, I highly recommend it. If you haven't heard of it, please go check it out. And if you've heard of it and checked it out, please buy it and go get it and read it, because it will greatly affect you in a positive way in your understanding of consciousness and therefore your purpose of life, the human condition in general. She says, quote, of the brain's 10 to the 10th power of neurons, that's a lot of neurons, some 10 to the 7th power are believed to be sensitive enough to register quantum level phenomenon at any one time. Wow. So our neurons are so sensitive that they can, almost all of them, all the time, recognize the sensitivities at a quantum level. And this is important when you understand the Heisenberg uncertainty principle or Schrodinger's cat and the idea of how quantum physics is influenced by human consciousness, right? So she's suggesting that most of our neurons are sensitive enough to pick up quantum mechanics, which would make sense because our consciousness is affecting quantum mechanics every time we make a decision or a choice. So, the next quote, she says, quote, our consciousness has the character of unbroken wholeness. It hangs together and allows our experiences to do so. This kind of settled uniformity is rare among dynamic processes in nature, but it does occur in materials that exist in condensed phases. In natural materials, this refers to the amount of order existing in a given system. Examples of these materials would include ice, salt, sugar crystals, ordinary magnets, superfluids, superconductors, laser light, electric currents in metals, and sound waves. Sound waves in crystals, specifically. She says all these materials or phenomenon have a degree of coherence such that the many atoms or molecules that make up the substance suddenly or gradually behave as one, unquote. And this idea of having a material that is so coherent or so ordered that it acts as one is the key for human consciousness, because that's exactly what our brain appears to be doing. It's somehow ordering all of the neurons in a way that is like these materials that she's talking about, so that it acts as one and gives us this ability to have thought. Well, I'm going to read another quote. She says, actually, I'm going to pass that one. I remember I didn't want to read that. Yeah, here it is. She says, this paragraph I'm passing up suggests that, well, maybe I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, quote, one such condensed phase that she had just described is the Froelich system, a man named Froelich, which is special because he thought it operated at normal body temperatures, but it was later discovered that it does not operate at normal body temperatures. The Froelich system would have to operate at higher temperatures than 98.6. But anyway, she didn't know that at the time of writing. She says, indeed, it is found only in biological tissue, this Froelich system, where the vibrating charged dipoles within cell walls emit signals of microwave frequency as they vibrate. An example would be yeast cells as they grow. And so far, however, the reason why living cells should generate and respond to microwave radiation and thus have the capacity to contain Bose-Einstein condensed phases. Now, the Bose-Einstein condensed phases are the most coherent thing in the universe that we know of. The reason that these cells could emit these microwave radiations and then have the capacity to contain Bose-Einstein condensed phases, she says, within their walls, remains a mystery, though one called for some explanation, she says. As Froelich himself says, quote, biological systems have developed to fulfill a certain purpose, and it is permissible, therefore, to ask for the purpose of a certain excitation. When something's excited, you want to ask, how did it get excited? What caused that? Well, we're discovering these cells are being excited so much that maybe they're being condensed in these Bose-Einstein phases or states. I know this may be a little confusing, but as I read, I think it'll clear it up a little bit. So hang with me here. She says again, quote, one physicist suggests that the purpose of the microwave producing vibrations in living cells might be related to the way living systems create order out of nature's chaos and confusion. When cell membranes vibrate sufficiently to pull themselves into a Bose-Einstein condensate, they are creating the most coherent form of order possible in nature, the order of unbroken wholeness. This might be the mechanism by which life violates the second law of thermodynamics, otherwise known as entropy, and according to which all inanimate systems are destined to degenerate into chaos. So it violates that chaos. Basically, she's saying life is violating these laws of physics. How is it that life doesn't just eventually decay into entropy? And that's a great question. uh, you know, so far nobody's even answered that question. This is now 30, 40 years later. I've got only a few more quotes here, but she says again, quote, other biophysicists have found evidence for the same sort of biological coherence, though their research suggests that it is a coherent ordering of photons in the range of visible light, rather than or in addition to those in the microwave range. So here she's suggesting that there's even other biophysicists who are discovering how it is these human cells are being coherent, not just through microwave vibrations, but even through the excitations of photons itself. So this is when she brings in a German physicist named Fritz Popp. Love his name. So she says, quote, German physicist Fritz Popp has discovered that living cells emit a weak glow, which is evidence of photon radiation, and suggests that the presence of what he calls coherent biophotons may play some crucial role in cell regulation. Scientists working independently in Japan have discovered the same effects, which they believe are, quote, clearly associated with a variety of vital activities and biological processes, unquote. Zohar continues to say, at least one Polish biophysicist has found evidence of the coherent ordering of photons in DNA itself, as have Popp and one of his German colleagues, unquote. So now we're seeing light itself is being released from human tissue, like the very DNA inside of our tissue. These biophysicists are discovering are being emitted. And light is extremely coherent. Light is one of the principles of the universe. It's basically a force coming from the electromagnetic, force, which, electricity emits photons. So it's connected, as I'll mention. She says, again, quote, she says, I think that the same Bose-Einstein condensation among neurons among neuron constituents is what distinguishes the consciousness from the non-conscious. She says, I think it is the physical basis of consciousness, this same Bose-Einstein condensation among neurons. So as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, she's basically suggesting that the Bose-Einstein condensate is occurring in the neural network of our brain. And this Bose-Einstein condensate is this coherence that it has is allowing us to have the consciousness that we have and probably access to memory. I was going to call it a train, access to the memory threads that we have in our brain. Again, she says, quote, at the level of consciousness that we understand, that which originates in our own brains, quantum relational holism, otherwise known as Bose-Einstein condensate, she says it could arise from the correlations of waves in the brain's powerful electromagnetic field created by the jiggling of charged protein or fat molecules in the neuron cell walls. The fat of a neuron cell wall would be the phospholipid layer around the cell and the protein in the cell. And this, of course, takes me right back to, or leads me to Dr. Bruce Lipton and his book, The Biology of Belief, where he discusses clearly how every cell in our body has proteins in it that are connected to that phospholipid fat layer around the cell, and they're sticking out of the cell and are able to pick up electromagnetic information from outside the cell, called epigenetics. Whoop. Okay, so she says here again to finish that the relationship would form something like a Bose-Einstein condensate, the most highly ordered form of relationship in the world, and that this state of affairs then gives rise to the unity of consciousness, the blackboard on which all of our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are written. And there it is, unquote. There it is. She says, that this Bose-Einstein condensate would explain how we would have this blackboard to be written our memories and our experiences of life. She finishes by saying, quote, a Bose-Einstein condensate, which is the extreme degree of relationship to provide the unity of consciousness, is so called because it is made up of bosons. Bosons are particles of force. They're basically photons, and they equal the electromagnetic force. And fermions, by the way, are particles of matter called electrons. And that's how she explains in her book, The Quantum Self Consciousness. And I totally believe it. I totally dig it. I think that the idea of having a brain that is sensitive enough to pick up on quantum mechanics would be necessary for us to influence quantum level, experiences. And then, when we are able to use our brain to effectively influence quantum mechanical states, that means we are using our brain, our thoughts, to influence the world around us, all matter and the influence, to influence the world around us. So, it reminds me again of that joke: does a tree make a sound when it falls if no one's there? And the answer is no. If you're there to hear it and experience it, then yes, it would make a sound. And it sounds counterintuitive. And there's a lot of people that say, well, maybe there's other things, like maybe a deer or a bear is there, and it can be the consciousness to hear the tree falling. And so therefore it would make a sound. But we'll never know, because even if a human puts a recording device in the forest and it's recording the tree falling, that recorder is basically acting as the consciousness. So it's basically, it's a funny joke, and it's totally it's regressive in a bad way, kind of. But when you go, instead of going backwards, when you go forwards and you start thinking about order and how order might affect the coherence of the brain, and how the brain is able to be sensitive enough to pick up on these quantum mechanical relationships, then it's really easy to see how our consciousness could be a holistic reality created through the vibrations of possibly light or microwaves. We're not sure yet. And give us this Bose-Einstein condensate. I'm excited about it. And I think it's important to understand how our consciousness works, or at least have theories about it, so we can alleviate any confusion about what it means to be a conscious person. And ultimately, I've discovered that to be a conscious, alive, thinking person means that there are connections to that thinness I was just showing in that short video about how there's the reality is thin, and there are many levels in that thinness where we can sort of see or even have access to the other side, and the other side can have access to us, and we better know about that. That's really important as we make decisions, as we live our life. I think I hear my dog asking for my attention, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop now. It's good to be back. It's good to see everybody. I hope everybody made it through the holidays and the crazy world and winter that we were having. And I know it was tough for me. you know. But I did it. I, sent all the gifts out, loved everybody I was supposed to love, and basically I'm feeling much, much better. I hope you are too. Have a good day. Love you guys.